Hello, my dear students. Welcome to Teacher at Home. Today, class, we are going to learn the sixth chapter, Civilizing the Native, Educating the Nation. The early chapters, you have seen how British rule affected Rajas and Nawabs, peasants and tribals. In this chapter, we will try and understand what implications it had for the lives of students. For the British in India wanted not only territorial conquest and control over revenues, they also felt that they had a cultural mission. They had to civilize the natives, change their customs and values. What changes were to be introduced? How were Indians to be educated, civilized, and made into what the British believed were good subjects? A British could find no simple answers to these questions. They continued to be debated for many decades. How the British saw education. Let us look at what the British thought and did, and how some of the ideas of education that we now take for granted evolved in the last 200 years. In the process of his inquiry, you'll also see how Indians reacted to British ideas and how they developed their own views about how Indians were to be educated. The tradition of Orientalism. In 1783, a person named William Jones arrived in Calcutta. He had an appointment as a junior judge at the Supreme Court that the company had set up. In addition of being an expert in law, Jones was linguistic. He had studied Greek and Latin at Oxford, knew French and English, had picked up Arabic from a friend, and had also learned Persian. At Calcutta, he began spending many hours a day with Pandit, who taught him the subtitles of Sanskrit language, grammar, and poetry. Soon he was studying ancient Indian texts on law, philosophy, religion, politics, morality, arithmetic, medicine, and other science. Jones discovered that his interests were shared by many foreign British officials living in Calcutta at the time. Englishmen like Henry Thomas Collybrock and Nathaniel Halhed were also busy discovering the ancient Indian heritage, mastering Indian languages, and translating Sanskrit and Persian works into English. Together with them, John set up the Asiatic Society of Bengal, started a journal called Asiatic Researches. Johns and Collybrock came to represent a particular attitude towards India. They shared a deep respect for ancient cultures, both of India and the West. Indian civilization, they felt, had attained its glory in the ancient past but has subsequently declined. In order to understand India, it was necessary to discover the sacred and legal texts that were produced in the ancient period. For only those texts could reveal the real ideas and laws of the Hindus and Muslims, and only a new study of the text could form the basis of future development in India. So Jones and Colberg went about discovering ancient texts, understanding their meaning, translating them, and making their findings known to others. This project, they believed, would not only help the British learn from Indian culture, but it would also help Indians rediscover their own heritage and understand the lost glories of their past. In this process, the British would become the guardians of Indian culture as well as its masters. Influenced by such ideas, many company officials argued that the British ought to promote Indian rather than Western learning. They felt that the institution should be set up to encourage the study of ancient Indian texts and to teach Sanskrit and Persian literature and poetry. Officials also thought that the Indians and Muslims ought to be taught that they were already familiar with and what they valued and treasured, not subject what they aligned to them. Only then, they believed, could the British hope to win a place in the hearts of the natives, and only then they could align rulers expect to the respected by the subjects. This object in view, a madrasa was set up in Calcutta in 1781 to promote the study of Arabic, Persian, and Islamic law, and the Hindu college was established in Benares in 1791 to encourage the study of an ancient Sanskrit text that would be useful for the administration of the country. Image represents how Orientalists thought of British power in India. You will notice that the majestic figure of Hastings, an enthusiastic supporter of the Orientalist, is placed between the standing figure on the Pandit at one side and seated Munshi on the other side. Hastings and other Orientalists needed Indian scholars to teach them the vernacular languages, tell them about the local customs and laws, and help them translate the interpret ancient texts. Hastings took the initiative to set up the Calcutta Madrasa and believed that the ancient customs of the country and Oriental learning ought to be the basis of British rule in India. Not all officials shared their views. Many were very strong in the criticism of the Orientalist, grave errors to the East. From the early 19th century, many British officials began to criticize the Orientalist vision of learning. They said that the knowledge of the East was full of errors, unscientific thought, each literature was non serious and light hearted. So they argued that it was wrong on the part of the British to spend so much effort in encouraging the study of Arabic and Sanskrit language and literature. James Mill was one of those who attacked the Orientalist. A British effort, he declared, should be to teach what the natives wanted or what they respected in order to please them and win a place in their heart. Aim of education ought to be to teach what was useful and practical. So Indians should be made familiar with the scientific and technical advances that the West and they had made rather than the poetry and sacred literature of the Orient. By the 1830s, the attack of the Orientalists became sharper. One of the most outspoken and influential of such critics of the time was Thomas Babington Macaulay. He saw India as an uncivilized country that needed to be civilized. No branch of Eastern knowledge, according to him, could be compared to what England had produced. Houdini declared Macaulay that as a single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. He argued that the British government in India stopped wasting public money in promoting Oriental learning, for it was no practical use. With great energy and passion, Macaulay emphasized the need to teach the English language. He felt that knowledge of English would allow Indians to read some of the finest literature the world had produced. It would make them aware of the developments in Western science and philosophy. Teaching of English could thus be way of civilizing people, changing their tastes, values and culture. Following Macaulay's minute, the English Education Act of 1835 was introduced. The decision was to make English the medium of instruction for higher education and to stop the promotion of Oriental institutions like the Calcutta Madrasa and Benares Sanskrit College. The institutions were seen as temples of darkness that were falling of themselves into decay. English textbooks now began to be produced for schools. Education for Commerce. In 1854, the Court of Directors of the English India Company in London sent an educational dispatch to the Governor General in India, issued by Charles Wood, the President of the Board of Control of the company. It has come to be known as Wood's Dispatch. Outlining the educational policy that was to be followed in India, it emphasized once again the practical benefits of a system of European learning as opposed to the Oriental language knowledge. One of the practical uses the dispatch pointed to was economic. European learning, it said, would enable Indians to recognize the advantages that flow from the expansion trade and commerce and make them see the importance of developing the resources of the country. Introducing them to European ways of life would change their taste and desires and create a demand for British goods, for Indians would begin to appreciate and buy things that were produced in Europe. Language of the wise, emphasizing the need to teach English, Macaulay declared. All parties seem to be agreed to one point that the dialects commonly spoken among the natives of India contain neither literary nor scientific information and are moreover so poor and rude. Until they were enriched from some other quarter, it will not be easy to translate any valuable work into them. Wood's dispatch also argued that European learning would improve the moral character of Indians. It would make them untruthful and honest, and thus supply the company with civil servants who could be trusted and depended upon. The literature of the East was not only full of grave errors, it could also not instill in people sense of duty and a commitment to work, nor could it develop the skills required for administration. Following the 1854 dispatch, several measures were introduced by the British. Education departments of the government were set up to extend control over all matters regarding education. Steps were taken to establish a system of university education. 1857, while the Sepoys ruled in revolt in Meerut and Delhi, universities were being established in Calcutta, Madras, and Bombay. Attempts were also made to bring about changes within the system of school education. An argument for European knowledge. Wood Dispatch in 1854 marked the final triumph of those who opposed Oriental learning. We must emphatically declare that the education would, which he desired to see extended in India is that which has for its object the diffusion of the improved arts, services, philosophy, and literature of Europe, in short, European knowledge. The demand for moral education. Argument for practical education was strongly criticized by the Christian missionaries in India in the 19th century. Missionaries felt that the education should attempt to improve the moral character of the people, and morality could be improved only through Christian education. Until 1813, the East India Company was opposed to missionary activities in India. It feared that missionary activities would provoke reaction amongst the local population and make them suspicious of British presence in India. Unable to establish an institution within British controlled territories, missionaries set up a mission at Serampore in an area under the control of the Danish East India Company. A printing press was set up in 18 and a college established in 1818. Over the 19th century, missionary schools were set up all over India. After 1857, however, the British government in India was reluctant to directly support missionary education. There was a feeling that any strong attack on local custom, practices, beliefs, and religious ideas might enrage native opinion. What happened to the local schools? Do you have any idea of how children were taught in pre British times? Have you ever wondered whether they went to schools? And if they were and if there were schools, what happened to this under British rule? The report of William Adam. In the 1830s, William Adam, a Scottish missionary, toured the districts of Bengal and Bihar. He had been asked by the company to report on the progress of education in vernacular schools. The report Adam produced is interesting. Adam found that there were over 1 lakh Pathsalas in Bengal and Bihar. They were small institutions with no more than 20 students each. But the total number of children being taught in these Pathshalas was considerable over 20 lakh. This institution was set up by wealthy people or the local community. At times they were started by a teacher guru. System of education was flexible. Few things that you associated with schools today were present in the Padashalas at that time. There were no fixed fee, no printed books, no separate school building, no benches or chairs, no blackboards, no system of separate classes, no roll call registers, no annual examination, and no regular timetable. In some places, classes were held under a banyan tree, other places in the corner of the village shop or temple at the Guru's home. Fee dependent on the income of parents, the rich had to pay more than the poor. Teaching was oral, and the Guru decided what to teach in accordance with the needs of the students. Students were not separated out into different classes, all of them sat together in one place. Guru interacted separately with group of children with different levels of learning. Adam discovered that this flexible system was suited to local needs. For instance, classes were not held during the harvest time when rural children often worked in the fields. The Pashala started once again when the crops had been cut and stored up. This meant that even children of peasant family could study. New route, new ruler. Up to the mid 19th century, the company was concerned primarily with higher education, so it allowed the local pashalas to function without much interference. After 1854, the company decided to improve the system of vernacular education. It felt that this could be done by introducing order within the system, imposing routines, establishing rules, ensuring regular inspections. Was this to be done? What measures did the company undertake? It appointed a number of government pundits, each in charge of looking after 4 to 5 schools. The task of the pandit was to visit the pashalas and try and improve the standard of teaching. Each guru was asked to submit periodic reports, take classes according to a regular timetable. Teaching was now to be based on textbooks, and learning was to be tested through a system of annual examination. Students were asked to pay a regular fee, attend regular classes, sit on fixed seats, and obey the new rules of discipline. Padashalas which accepted the new rules were supported through government grants. Those who were unwilling to work within the new system received no government support. Over time, gurus who wanted to retain their independence found it difficult to complete with the government aided and regulated pathshalas. The new rules and routines had another consequence. In the earlier system, children from the poor peasant families had been able to go to pathshalas. Since the timetable was flexible, the discipline of the new system demanded a regular attendance and even harvested regular and even during harvest time when children of poor family had to work in their fields, inability to attend the school came to be seen as indiscipline as evidence of the lack of desire to learn. The agenda for a new education. British officials were not only people thinking of about education in India. From the early 19th century, many thinkers from different parts of India began to talk of the need to fight the spread of education. Impressed with the developments in Europe, some Indians felt that Western education would help modernize India. They urged the British to open more schools, colleges, and universities and spend more money on education. We'll read about some of these efforts in Chapter 8. In a speech delivered on January 15, 1905 in Bombay, Arvind Ghosh stated that the goal of national education was to awaken the spirit of nationality among the students. This required a contemplation of the heroic deeds of the ancestors. Education should be imparted in the vernacular so as to reach the largest number of people. Arvind Ghosh emphasized that although the students should remain connected to their own roots, they should also take the fullest advantage of the modern scientific discoveries and Western experiments in popular governments. Moreover, the students should also learn some useful craft so that they could be able to find some moderatively remunerative employment after leaving their schools. Other Indians, however, who reacted against Western education, Mahatma Gandhi, Rabindranath Tagore were the two such individuals. Let us look at what they had to say. English education has enslaved us. Mahatma Gandhi argued that colonial education created a sense of inferiority in the minds of the Indians. It made them see Western civilization as superior and destroyed the pride that had in their own culture. There were poison in the education, said Mahatma Gandhi. It was sinful. It enslaved Indians. It is an even spell on them, charmed by the West, appreciating everything that came from the West. Indians educated in the institution became admiring rule. Mahatma Gandhi wanted an education that could help Indians recover their sense of dignity and self respect. During the national movement, he urged students to leave educational institutions in order to show the British the Indians were no longer willing to be enslaved. Mahatma Gandhi strongly felt that Indian languages ought to be the medium of teaching. Education in English stripped Indians distance from their own social surroundings and made them strangers in their own lands. Speaking of foreign despising local culture, the English educator did not know how to relate to their masses. Western education, Mahatma Gandhi said, focused on reading and writing rather than oral knowledge. It valued textbooks rather than lived experience and practical knowledge. He argued that education ought to develop a person's mind and soul. Literacy or simple learning to read and write by itself and not to count as education. People had to work with their hands, learn a craft, and know how different things operated. This would develop their mind and their capacity to understand. Literacy in itself is not an education. Mahatma Gandhi wrote, by education, I mean an all round drawing out of the best in child and man, body, mind, and spirit. Literacy is not the end of education, or even the beginning. It is only one of the means whereby man and women would be educated. Literacy in itself is not education. It would therefore begin in the child's education by teaching it a useful handicraft and enabling to produce from the moment it begins its training. I hold that the highest development of the mind and the soul is possible under such a system of education. Only even every handicraft has to be taught, not merely mechanical as it is done today, but scientifically, that is, child should know the why and wherever of every process. Binationalist sentiments spread. Other thinkers also began thinking of a system of national education which would be radically different from that set up by the British. Tagore's Abode of Peace. Many of you have heard of Shantiniketan. Do you know why it was established and by whom? Rabindranath Tagore started the institution in 1901. As a child, Tagore hated going to school. He found it suffocating and oppressive. The school appeared like a prison, for he could never do what he felt like doing. So, while other children listened to the teacher, Tagore's mind would wander away. Experience of his school days in Calcutta shaped Tagore's ideas of education. On growing up, he wanted to set up a school where the children was happy, where she could be free and creative, where she was able to explore her own thoughts and desires. Tagore felt that childhood ought to be a kind of self-learning outside the rigid and restrictions discipline of the schooling system set up by the British. Teachers have to be initiative, understand the child, and help the child develop her curiosity. According to Tagore, the exciting schools kill the natural desire of the child to be creative sense of wonder. Tagore was of the view that creative learning would be encouraged only within a natural environment. So he chose to set up his school 100 kilometers away from Calcutta, in a rural setting. He saw it as an abode of peace. Shantiniketan were living in harmony with nature. Children could cultivate their natural creativity. In many senses, Tagore and Mahatma Gandhi thought about education in similar ways. There were, however, differences too. Gandhiji was highly critical of Western civilization and its worship of machines and technology. Tagore wanted to combine elements of modern Western civilization with what he saw as the best within Indian tradition. He emphasized the need to teach science and technology at Shantiniketan along with art, music, and dance. Many individuals and thinkers were thus thinking about the way a national educational system could be fashioned. Some wanted changes within the system set up by the British and felt that the system could be extended so as to include wider sessions of people. Others argued that alternate system be created so that people were educated into a culture that was truly national. Who was to define was truly national? The debate about what this national education ought to be continued till after independence. So that's all about this chapter. If you are interested, please do share, subscribe, and like my channel. Thank you.